We live in an amazing time when it is possible to obtain vast amounts of information from various sources. Millions of printed and online publications have granted us access to all kinds of knowledge. However, despite this, many discoveries and historical events remain hidden from the general public. In this collection, you will become acquainted with those secrets that scientists and authorities prefer to keep silent about. Enjoy watching. In the Supe Valley in Peru lies the mysterious architectural monument of Caral, also known as the City of the Sun. The ruins of this lost city stretch across a desert terrace above the green valley of the Supe River, 23 kilometers from the Pacific Ocean coast. Surrounded by dense jungle, this city remained hidden from view for a long time, until it was discovered by chance. This significant event occurred in 1949 when local farmers began clearing land for agricultural use. Less than a year later, the first archaeological excavations began at the site, led by Peruvian archaeologist Ruth Shady Solis. However, comprehensive study of the city only began in the 1990s when scientists had access to more modern technology. With its help, experts were able to reconstruct the appearance of the ancient city. As it turned out, Caral had a complex layout and many monumental structures. The city contained several pyramids, plazas, canals, and other buildings. One of the most famous structures is the Pyramid of the Sun, which stands 18 meters tall. For a long time, it was believed that Caral was built about 4,600 years ago. However, modern research conducted in recent decades indicates that the city may be significantly older. Some researchers believe that the city could have been built as early as the 4th millennium BCE, based on the age of reeds from which several bags found in Caral were made. This discovery caused a real stir. Many historians categorically refuse to acknowledge that advanced civilizations existed on the territory of modern-day America nearly 1,500 years earlier than previously thought. What caused such negativity and why scholars strive to remain silent about the latest research is unknown. In any case, Caral continues to be one of the most fascinating and mysterious archaeological landmarks of Peru. On December 9, 1965, residents of 6 U.S. states witnessed a mysterious event. All of these people saw a bright fireball in the sky, which was rapidly falling, leaving behind a trail of smoke and sparks. Eventually, this mysterious object fell near the small town of Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. According to several local residents, they hurried to find the place where the burning object had fallen and discovered strange fragments with some kind of hieroglyphs nearby. They did not manage to reach the object itself, as firefighters, police, and military personnel had already arrived. The site was completely cordoned off and no unauthorized persons were allowed in. The authorities of Pennsylvania and federal agencies began an investigation into the incident. The first thing they did was seize the wreckage of the fallen object and transport it to an unknown location. People who witnessed the event demanded to be informed about what had happened that evening and what the burning ball in the sky was. However, official statements did not contain any details about the nature of the object. These actions led to the emergence of many theories explaining the incident. According to one of the most popular versions, an alien spacecraft crashed in Kecksburg. Supporters of this theory offer numerous arguments in its favor. They claim that despite the area being heavily guarded, people still managed to find unusual debris that did not match any known earthly materials. Moreover, if the authorities did not provide details about the incident, and never showed photographs of what fell from the sky, then they must have had something to hide. And if it had been an ordinary meteorite, that information would definitely have been made public. In addition to this hypothesis, there are many alternative explanations, including the possibility that it was a secret military experiment or the crash of the Soviet satellite Cosmos 96. The Kecksburg incident caused a huge public outcry, but was soon forgotten. However, in 2003, when journalist Leslie Kean filed a lawsuit against NASA under the Freedom of Information Act to obtain official documents, the Kecksburg incident came back into the spotlight. But once again, neither the US authorities nor NASA disclosed what had happened. According to them, all documents related to the case had been lost. Of course, we all understand that this is not true. But why did the authorities want to hide the details of the incident? Unfortunately, that remains a mystery. One of the most well-known man-made disasters is, of course, the Chernobyl nuclear accident. However, few people know that a major nuclear tragedy occurred in the Soviet Union even before that incident. It remained unspoken for a long time and was eventually forgotten. This refers to the Kyshtym disaster, which took place on September 29, 1957 at the Mayak chemical plant in the closed city of Chelyabinsk 40, now known as Ozersk, located in the Chelyabinsk region of Russia. On that fateful day, an explosion occurred in one of the storage tanks for liquid radioactive waste at the Mayak plant, commonly known as Tank Number 14. This tank contained plutonium compounds. According to the official version, the explosion was caused by a failure in the cooling system. As a result of the chemical reaction and subsequent explosion, the cylinder containing the plutonium was completely destroyed. The contents of the tank, with a total activity of no less than 20 million curies, were released into the atmosphere, forming a radioactive cloud. Amazingly, the radiation release caused a kind of shimmering phenomenon similar to the Northern Lights. Eyewitnesses observed this with awe, unaware of its origin. An entire article was even dedicated to this phenomenon in the newspaper Chelyabinski Rabochi. At the time, no one knew that a serious man-made disaster had occurred in their area. While the local residents marveled at the strange glow, the radioactive cloud spread over vast areas, affecting 217 settlements in the Chelyabinsk, Sverdlovsk, and Tyumen regions with a total population of about 270,000 people. Of course, emergency services were informed of the accident. However, there was a catastrophic shortage of personnel for cleanup, so military personnel and prisoners were involved, and later joined by civilian agencies. The authorities concealed the fact of the accident for a long time, fearing panic and international consequences. The evacuation of residents did not begin until October 6th, and even then, no one was informed why they had to leave their homes. The main reason for the authorities' silence was the desire to avoid publicity and maintain secrecy around nuclear development. The accident occurred in a closed city that did not appear on publicly available maps, and information about it could have undermined trust in Soviet nuclear programs. Only in July 1989, during a session of the Supreme Soviet, was the explosion officially confirmed. Since then, a sanitary zone was established in the affected area, and 9 years later, the East Ural Nature Reserve was created, where elevated radiation levels are still recorded. Although the Kyshtym disaster remained unknown for a long time, in terms of scale, it was surpassed only by the disasters at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant and Fukushima 1. August 15, 1907 was an ordinary working day for astronomer Jerry Amon. As usual, he was working at the Big Ear radio telescope at Ohio State University, when suddenly the scientist noticed that the telescope had recorded an unusual signal unlike any previously registered. Amon was so astonished by the characteristics of this signal that he circled the corresponding group of symbols on the printout with a red pen and wrote "Wow" next to it. This note gave the signal its name, which became known as the Wow signal. Jerry Amon had a PhD in astronomy, so very little could surprise him in his routine work. However, this signal was unique. It stood out from other similar signals due to several features. Its transmission bandwidth and signal-to-noise ratio were exactly what scientists had predicted for a possible extraterrestrial signal. This caused genuine excitement and amazement in Amon, as the probability of a random coincidence was extremely low. This unusual signal was observed for exactly 72 seconds, with its intensity gradually increasing for the first 36 seconds and then decreasing for the same duration. This shape of the intensity graph and the duration of the signal fully matched the expected characteristics of an extraterrestrial signal. And although many scientists did not believe in the existence of extraterrestrial civilizations, this discovery still stirred their minds. However, despite all hopes and expectations, this signal was never recorded again. For a long time, scientists speculated about what could have been the source of such an unusual phenomenon. At the time, they lacked the technology to study the recorded signal in more detail, and for this reason, ufologists officially declared it as undeniable proof of the existence of aliens. It is quite possible that this was indeed the case, but modern scientists claim that with the help of the latest research, They managed to determine that the signal was caused by hydrogen clouds from comets located in the constellation Sagittarius at the time of observation. However, no evidence of this claim has been provided by astronomers, so the WOW signal continues to remain one of the most thrilling mysteries in the history of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. The Great Sphinx, located in Giza, is the oldest monumental sculpture that has survived to this day. It is over 4,500 years old. Since ancient times, it has been believed that beneath the paws of the Great Sphinx lie certain secret chambers known as the Hall of Records or the Hall of Knowledge. This belief is based on Coptic legends and numerous records of ancient philosophers. In particular, Herodotus, who visited Egypt in the 5th century BC, mentioned the existence of secret rooms beneath the Sphinx that contain ancient artifacts and texts. He said that these chambers were sealed and guarded by priests to keep their contents secret. One might wonder why this is a mystery, since over so many years the theory could have been verified, especially considering that modern archaeologists have numerous tools and technologies at their disposal. But it's not that simple. The Egyptian authorities strictly prohibit any research on the Great Sphinx. They explain their ban by stating that archaeological excavations could damage the ancient structure. However, many researchers believe that something is indeed hidden beneath the Sphinx's paws that the authorities do not want to reveal to the public. Despite all prohibitions, in 1990, historian John Anthony West and geophysicist Thomas Dobecki conducted a secret study of the Great Sphinx. They used ground-penetrating radar and seismic tomography to examine the area under the paws. The results of this work were shocking. Cavities and anomalies were identified beneath the sculpture, indicating the potential presence of hidden voids or chambers. These results were presented in several scientific publications and at a press conference. Furthermore, the details of this research were broadcast in 1993 in the NBC program The Mystery of the Sphinx. The evidence that there are indeed secret rooms beneath the Sphinx's paws was undeniable. However, many specialists still responded skeptically to the conclusions of West and Dobecki, believing these were just natural cavities and cracks, not man-made chambers. The well-known Egyptologist Zahi Hawass was long skeptical of these findings, but the public insisted on continuing the investigation. Several years later, Hawass conducted his own study of the Great Sphinx using geodetic radar. To everyone's surprise, he admitted that a network of galleries and chambers does exist beneath the sculpture, but claimed that all of them are empty. At the same time, he did not publish any proof that there is indeed nothing there. Thus, to this day, the mystery of the Sphinx remains one of the most fascinating enigmas of the ancient world. In 1929, the scientific community was stunned by a sensational discovery that later became known as the Piri Reis map. This find was made in Istanbul, in the ancient archives of the Topkapi Palace. The author of the map was Admiral Piri Reis, who lived in the 16th century. It's worth noting that this man had never been to the places indicated on the map. He created his work based on numerous ancient maps. The Piri Reis map is truly a unique artifact, as it shows coastlines that had not yet been explored by Europeans at the time. But the most interesting part is that it features Antarctica without its ice cover. This means that the document used by Piri Reis to depict Antarctica must have dated back to at least the 4th millennium BCE. But how is this possible, when it has long been believed that Antarctica was only discovered in the early 19th century? This question continues to puzzle scientists to this day. For this reason, most of them consider the Piri Reis map a hoax. However, the research of Charles Hapgood, a professor of the history of science at Keene College, proves the opposite and confirms the authenticity of the artifact. In the 1960s, he conducted a thorough analysis and concluded that the data on the map corresponded to scientific discoveries made only in the 20th century. Hapgood also found that some elements of the map may have been compiled from even older sources, possibly prehistoric. Despite Hapgood's convincing arguments and the unique features of the map, many scholars still continue to deny the artifact's authenticity. Thus, the Piri Reis map remains one of the most mysterious and discussed finds in the history of cartography. In 1932, the famous American psychic Edgar Cayce spoke about Atlantis during one of his presentations. At that time, he said that traces of this mythical civilization would soon be found in the Atlantic Ocean near the Bahamas. Few people believed his words back then, but in 1968, the whole world began to reconsider his prediction because a significant event occurred that year. While exploring the ocean floor, a scientist named Manson Valentine discovered a group of stone blocks near the northwest coast of North Bimini Island, which resembled a road. This find became known as the Bimini Road. When Valentine saw the strange structures at a depth of about 5.5 meters, he was extremely surprised. The rectangular limestone blocks had rounded edges in a square shape, as if they had been polished. Moreover, the stones lay in such a sequence as if someone had arranged them as a pathway leading to some important structure. News of the discovery spread quickly, and scientists from around the world began studying the mysterious structures. Some people even recalled Cayce's words and believed that these could truly be the ruins of sunken Atlantis. Needless to say, scientists didn't even want to hear about Atlantis. They were convinced that the Bimini Road was formed naturally, and the smooth and unusual shapes of the blocks resulted from geological processes and water erosion. Radiocarbon dating could help clarify the issue. However, even in this area, scientists found themselves in disagreement. The first study conducted at the University of Miami laboratory indicated the blocks were about 3,500 years old. However, another analysis conducted by John Gifford revealed that their age was more than 15,000 years. Debates about the age and origin of the Bimini Road continue to this day. Perhaps in the future, with more advanced technologies, people will finally be able to solve the mystery of these enigmatic structures. On September 22, 1979, the American satellite Vela 6911 recorded something unusual. A double flash, characteristic of a nuclear explosion, lit up the sky over the South Atlantic in the area surrounding the Prince Edward Islands. This event marked the beginning of a mysterious incident known as the Vela incident. Immediately after the anomaly was detected, U.S. intelligence agencies held a secret meeting during which they decided to conduct a classified investigation of the event. Various studies were carried out to determine the possible sources of the flash. The U.S. authorities obtained the necessary data and began comparing it. Unfortunately, the information they had only raised more questions and provided no answers. Firstly, the flash recorded by the satellite was not accompanied by seismic or hydroacoustic data, which usually accompany nuclear tests. Secondly, the investigation found no traces of radioactive substances. All these factors cast doubt on the official version of a nuclear explosion. However, the intelligence community and the U.S. National Security Council still concluded that it might have been a low-yield nuclear explosion. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, suspicions fell on South Africa and Israel, which were believed to have possibly conducted a joint test. And although the incident seemed like a serious issue for international security, U.S. authorities continued to keep it under wraps. Nevertheless, all secrets eventually come to light. Scientists and journalists began independently trying to learn more about the incident. They even managed to obtain data on strange phenomena observed on September 22, 1979. For example, that day, an underwater hydrophone system recorded a distant explosion in the ocean, comparable to a bomb with a yield of 2 to 3 kilotons, and an unusual aurora borealis, uncharacteristic for that time of year, was observed at a Japanese Arctic station. Ultimately, in 1980, the U.S. National Security Council was forced to declassify its report on the incident. And although information about the event was made public, it did not bring any clarity to the story. To this day, it remains a mystery whether this was truly a nuclear test, and if so, which country conducted it. Israel still denies any involvement in the incident, although at the same time, the country neither confirms nor denies having nuclear weapons. In February 1959, a tragic and mysterious story became known in the northern Sverdlovsk region of Russia, one that still raises many questions and debates to this day. Allegedly, on February 2nd of that year, a group of 9 experienced hikers led by Igor Dyatlov died near Mount Kolatsiakl. What happened to these people that day remains unknown. The story began on January 23, 1959, when 9 tourists set off on a high-difficulty ski trek. The group planned to climb Mount Oika Chakur and Mount Otorten and then return to the village of Vijay, from where they were supposed to telegraph the completion of their route on February 12th. However, the young people did not appear at the designated time, prompting a search operation. For several days, the search yielded no results. But on February 26th, rescuers discovered a tent on the slope of Mount Kaulat Siyakul that had been cut open from the inside. There was no one inside. Nearby, footprints led off toward the forest. Everything suggested that something had forced the experienced hikers to flee the tent barefoot and without clothing in severe frost. Within a 1.5-kilometer radius, rescuers found the bodies of all group members showing signs of frostbite. Some of the bodies had severe injuries, including bruises, fractures, and even lacerations. The incident understandably sparked many discussions, but the country's authorities were in no hurry to explain the cause of the young people's deaths. Moreover, all case materials were carefully concealed. Of course, an official investigation was conducted after the incident, which concluded that the tourists' deaths were an accident caused by a natural disaster. Experts also offered their version of events. According to them, on February 1st, 1959, the hikers reached the eastern slope of the mountain. They then descended 800 meters and decided to pitch their tent and spend the night there. However, the site was avalanche-prone. Late at night, the group heard sounds characteristic of an approaching avalanche, forcing them to flee. But none of them survived the cold and strong winds. Despite this official explanation, the Dyatlov Pass incident continues to raise many questions. Many people believe that the injuries on the bodies exclude natural causes of death. In their opinion, the Dyatlov group may have perished after accidentally becoming victims of secret military exercises. This is why the authorities are allegedly hiding the truth about what happened. According to another theory, the young people might have been attacked by unknown mystical creatures, such as a yeti, or were simply murdered by someone. Unfortunately, none of these theories have evidence, and without access to classified archives and documents, the details of the incident remain a matter of speculation. On June 30, 1908, over a vast area of central Siberia, in the interfluve of the lower Tunguska and the Lena rivers, a mysterious event occurred. Residents of many settlements witnessed a giant ball in the sky, moving from southeast to northwest. Its flight was accompanied by sounds resembling thunder. When the ball collided with the ground, there was a powerful explosion, estimated to be between 10 and 40 megatons in TNT equivalent, comparable to the energy of 2,000 nuclear bombs. The blast wave was so strong that it flattened the forest in a radius of about 40 kilometers. Although the populated areas were far from the site of the mysterious object's fall, windows were shattered in many homes. Additionally, after the event, strange atmospheric phenomena were observed across much of the northern hemisphere, including nighttime glowing skies, bright noctilucent clouds, and daytime optical effects such as halos and coronas around the sun. Despite the magnitude of the event, Soviet authorities showed no initiative to investigate the incident. Only 19 years later, in 1927, researcher Leonid Kulik began surveying the site and discovered a radial tree fall pattern around the epicenter. The trees were flattened outwards from the center, with some in the middle still standing but stripped of branches. He suggested that a large iron meteorite had fallen in this location. However, no fragments were ever found. In the following years, the USSR Academy of Sciences conducted 2 more expeditions under Kulik's leadership, and in 1958, the study of the epicenter was resumed by the Meteorite Committee of the USSR Academy of Sciences, led by scientist Kirill Florensky. But even after all this, no meteorite fragments were found. What actually happened that day remains unknown. In fact, there are over 100 theories explaining the incident, but none have conclusive evidence. According to the official version, the Tunguska object was a comet that completely vaporized at high altitude, a theory that sounds very strange. And although the incident is commonly referred to as the Tunguska meteorite, this is merely a convention, as it's possible that no meteorite fell at all. The mystery might have been solved if authorities had initiated an investigation immediately after the event. But that did not happen. For this reason, the Tunguska catastrophe remains one of the most mysterious and debated topics in the history of science. One March day in 1924, in the small French village of Glozel, located in the Auvergne region, an event occurred that forever changed the life of a 17-year-old boy named Émile Fredin. That day, he went out into the field with his grandfather as usual. While plowing the land, the leg of one of the oxen pulling the plow sank into the ground, and Émile, trying to free the animal, fell into a pit himself. Just imagine how surprised these people were when they discovered that it was not just a sinkhole, but a man-made hiding place. Its walls were lined with bricks, and the floor was covered with clay tiles. Looking around, Émile discovered human bones in the pit, along with numerous artifacts, including ceramic fragments, stone and bone tools, and clay tablets with mysterious symbols. The next day, Émile told his schoolteacher, Adrienne Picondet, about his discovery. She tried to attract the attention of many French archaeologists to the find, but only Benoit Clément responded to her message. He soon arrived in Glozel with prosecutor Joseph Vilp. However, these men told Émile that the finds had no scientific interest, although, as it turned out later, they had taken several artifacts with them. In 1925, the case drew the attention of a doctor and amateur archaeologist named Antonin Morlet. This man was truly interested in solving the mystery of these artifacts. He dedicated over 11 years to excavations, and during this time discovered numerous clay tablets with inscriptions and handprints, human bones, clay sculptures, and other artifacts inside the pit. Morlet was especially fascinated by the tablets, which bore inscriptions resembling Etruscan and Cretan symbols. However, the language was unknown. This meant that a developed civilization had once existed in the area, previously unknown to modern historians. This discovery should have been sensational, but that did not happen. Renowned French archaeologists not only declared the find a hoax, but they also banned in research on the discovered artifacts. Moreover, René Dussault, curator of the Louvre, an expert on ancient inscriptions, accused Émile Fredin of forgery, which led to a court case. The young man won the case, but instead of being praised for his valuable find, he faced slander. Surprisingly, the story did not end there, and research on the Glozel artifacts reached a new level. The criminal police intervened, and the head of the forensic department of Paris, Gaston Edmond Bayle, became involved. Due to the unfolding situation, Morlet had to cease excavations in 1936, leaving many mysteries for future generations of researchers. Despite all the attacks, Émile Fredin decided to dedicate his life to the unusual discovery and even opened a small museum with the artifacts on his farm. Only after his death in 2010 did he finally receive a recognition within a narrow circle of archaeologists. Nevertheless, debates between supporters and opponents of the authenticity of the Glozel artifacts continue to this day. The Dead Sea Scrolls are a fairly well-known archaeological discovery. However, few people know about the existence of the most mysterious manuscript among them, known as the Copper Scroll. This unusual find was made on March 20th, 1953 in Cave 3, near the shore of the Dead Sea, in Qumran. Along with this scroll, many parchment and papyrus scrolls were also found. The Copper Scroll differs from the other Dead Sea manuscripts in many ways. Firstly, it is made not of papyrus, but of an alloy of copper and tin. Secondly, while all the other manuscripts contained religious texts and literary works, this artifact is a list of places where various items made of gold and silver are supposedly hidden. Moreover, the text of the scroll is written in a language close to the Hebrew of the 2nd century and contains about 3,000 letters. Most researchers believe that it may point to hidden treasures of the Jerusalem Temple, destroyed in 587 BCE. Despite significant interest in the Copper Scroll, many scholars prefer not to discuss its content and significance. Most likely, this is because they are trying to conceal the location of a wealthy treasury. However, the archaeologists themselves explain this by saying that these scrolls may be apocryphal, lacking practical value, and having an eschatological character. This is why the Copper Scroll of the Dead Sea remains one of the most mysterious and discussed discoveries in the history of archaeology. In 1945, the Japanese cities of Hiroshima became the first populated area in the world to suffer from a nuclear explosion. The entire world was shaken by the horror faced by the residents of this city, and people everywhere began to fear nuclear war. However, just 4 years after the incident, the US government carried out a terrifying project that is rarely discussed. It was called Green Run. The The Green Run project began in December 1949 in Hanford, Washington. Its purpose was to study the possibility of detecting nuclear tests in other countries by intentionally releasing radioactive substances into the atmosphere. For this experiment, poorly cooled nuclear fuel was used, which had cooled for only 16 days instead of the standard 125. As a result, a massive amount of radioactive iodine-131 and xenon-133 was released into the atmosphere. American scientists assumed that the radioactive substances would remain in the lower atmosphere, meaning they would not pose a serious danger to the population. However, things did not go as planned, and the radioactive materials settled on the ground. Additionally, after the test, the weather changed significantly, and under the influence of a cyclone, the materials spread throughout the state of Washington, contaminating water, soil, and vegetation. Despite the experiment getting out of control, the U.S. authorities continued to keep it a secret. Local residents were completely unaware of the danger, and none of them were evacuated or even examined by medical professionals. The implementation of Green Run and the failure of the experiment remained unspoken for 40 years. It wasn't until the 1990s that information began to leak to the media about large-scale radiation experiments conducted on U.S. soil. That's when the world finally learned about the secret Green Run project. Understandably, this shocking information undermined public trust in the government. Even though the damage to the health of local residents was minimal, the very fact that people were secretly exposed to serious risk represents a gross violation of ethical norms. In 1954, one of the most mysterious stories of the 20th century occurred at Tokyo Haneda Airport. On that day, a flight from Europe arrived in Japan. Customs officers were conducting document checks. Among the passengers undergoing inspection was a middle-aged man who would later become known as the Man from Taured. At first glance, there was nothing unusual about him, but when customs officers began asking him questions, they were shocked by the information they received. When they asked the passenger about the country he came from, the man confidently replied that he was from Taured. The customs officers had never heard of such a country, which greatly surprised the man. According to him, Taured was located between France and Spain. The customs officers were stunned. They showed him a map of the world, on which the country of Andorra was located between France and Spain. But the man insisted that Andorra did not exist and that Taured was in its place. As proof, he presented his wallet, which contained banknotes from several European countries, and he also showed a passport and driver's license issued in Taured. It is worth noting that the passport contained stamps indicating that the man had visited Japan 3 times before. The mysterious man attracted the attention of the police. They managed to determine that none of the companies and hotel he mentioned had any knowledge of his existence. All of this raised doubts, so the man was detained for further investigation of his identity. The man from Taured was placed in a hotel under 24-hour police surveillance. However, something incredible happened that night. The man disappeared as if he had never existed. Along with him, all his documents, which were in the airport security room, also vanished. Although Japanese security services tried to investigate, no leads were ever found. When law enforcement agencies from other countries became interested in the story, they requested the arrival logs of incoming passengers, but the airport refused, citing privacy protection. For this reason, the question of whether the man from Taured truly existed remains unanswered. In 1963, in the Turkish province of Şanlıurfa, an ancient structure known as Göbekli Tepe was discovered. For some reason, archaeologists at the time did not give significance to this discovery. Only in 1994 did full-scale excavations begin at this site. Led by German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, it turned out that this find was of immense value to archaeologists and historians, as it is the oldest known structure preserved to this day. Göbekli Tepe became famous for its massive T-shaped stone pillars, reaching heights of 5 meters. They were arranged in circles and ovals, indicating their ritual significance. On the stones, archaeologists found depictions of various animals, as well as abstract symbols and scenes that remain a mystery to scientists. Since its discovery, this structure has been the subject of numerous studies. Archaeologists and scientists from around the world began working at the site, trying to unravel its secrets. During the excavations, not only were stone pillars found, but also remnants of foundations. This indicated that other structures once stood in the complex. However, the most astonishing aspect of this discovery is, of course, its age. Through radiocarbon dating, scientists determined that Göbekli Tepe was built around 12,000 years ago, during a time when humanity was just beginning to transition from a nomadic to a sedentary lifestyle. Many scientists refuse to believe that this structure is that ancient, and that's not surprising, as the discovery forces a complete reevaluation of ancient world history. But none of the historians want to delve into that. The fact is that, despite numerous studies and excavations, scientists still cannot answer the question of who exactly built Göbekli Tepe and what functions it served. For this reason, the structure continues to remain in the shadows, unlike the Egyptian pyramids and Stonehenge, which are over 7,000 years younger than Göbekli Tepe. And that's all from me. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon. Your engagement is the best reward for me. Thank you for watching. See you soon. Bye.